microphone and your screen, as we are with a lot of people. Still people coming in. Okay, 7 o'clock. I will start. I'm Gilbert van Zijl, your host for tonight. Welcome to Isaka Square Table of January 11, 2023. I hope you all had a nice start of the year. Some housekeeping rules before we start. Please mute your microphone, stop sharing your video as we are over 150 people. Make sure you appear on Teams with the same first and last name used for registration. Otherwise, it will be difficult for us to share the CPE points. The presentation will be recorded along with the slides, and it might be released by mail after the session. And if you have any questions, please raise hand or type in the chat box. And for this presentation, questions are welcome during the meeting, complete hour. And then our speaker today, Vincent van Dijk. He is the owner of Security Scientist, but he will introduce himself much better. So Vincent, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the nice introduction. So I'm Vincent. I'm owner of Security Scientist. Sorry?
Are you also taking over the presentation?
I will first explain this one, then I will take it over.
Okay, good.
So Vincent van Dijk, owner of Cybersecurity Scientist, basically my small one-man company I got going on, mainly regarding cybersecurity consultancy. And I did the research together with Antwerp Management School, in which I designed or came up with a cybersecurity canvas. That's a methodology based. I developed out of my research into smaller companies. And from there I will start the presentation. Gilbert, can you give me a sign if it works?
Yeah, take over, please. Yeah, it works.
Great. So, the cybersecurity canvas. This presentation will be about, it's mainly about the new way I use to easily convey a cybersecurity strategy. And for this, for the cybersecurity canvas, I put on 7 topics which we will discuss. First, we will start with some benefits, because I think it's really core before you start listening to the rest, that you know why would you use the cybersecurity canvas? What are the benefits of it? And why would you integrate them into your cybersecurity strategy building? Then I will go into what is it exactly, following by its origin. Its origin in the research I did with Antwerp Management School. After that, we will become very practical. So we go to how to use it. I will give you a few examples. And I think for most of you, it will be very interesting to also see how we can actually, it doesn't have to be a replacement of standards. You can really use it with your current way of working. And in the end, we will end up with a nice Q&A. Although you can ask me questions during the presentation, that's all fine. But to start off, the benefits. There are 3 main benefits of using the canvas. And I really think that the first one, or the one in the middle, it's not the first one, but the one in the middle is the most important one. The cybersecurity canvas allows you to connect cybersecurity to business goals. And it's also a way to communicate with stakeholders from the business, that in one image you can show them what they want to reach, what the risks are, and connect it to why does cybersecurity matter in that context, and what is the strategy. Also, what it does, it simplifies your strategy. So instead of having long Excel sheets or long PowerPoints, we can basically map it down on one image. You can literally explain your cybersecurity approach within one slide. And lastly, but it's also very important, it allows you to collaborate easy with stakeholders. But one of the main benefits I actually noticed in practice, it's also really easy to share it with other companies and organizations to compare how does your strategy compare to another company and what could you learn from each other. And that I think it's really powerful. And most of all, it's free to use with no restrictions. You can use it however you want. I think that's really important. You can share it, you can manipulate it, you can make your own version of it. Totally free to use. Now we will go shortly into what is it exactly? What is this cybersecurity canvas? And basically, it's like a compass, like you see here. You can see my point. You can see this here is the whole canvas. So you can portray your cybersecurity strategy in the canvas. It's born out of scientific research. We did some really grounded research and came up with it. The science research, to be specific, creates a single view. And for everyone that ever worked with business model canvas, value proposition canvas, or other marketing as business related canvases, it works in a very similar manner. I think especially if you worked already before with business model canvas, you will feel right at home. I created this together with Antwerp Management School, and we're still working together here and there to continue to improve the canvas. Now, how does the canvas work? It has two main components. You have the why and you have the how. And the why is the logical part of the cybersecurity brain, and that one comes with mission, risks, laws. You're really going into what is the goal of the business, what's the business context. And the how is the right side, that's the creative part of the cybersecurity brain, of the cybersecurity canvas. And that there you need to be a little bit more creative, but there you tackle technology, people, and processes in order to basically reduce the risks on the left side. So you're trying to connect those two, and that is really the core of the canvas. You are able to connect the left side of the brain, which tends to be, that could be a management team, that could be a board, that could be the business side, and connect it with the right side. So you connect the business with technology. And we can explain this with I made a very simple example. And here you see a digital marketing company where we start with just the line in the middle and we start describing the goal. And in this case, their goal is to increase their revenue with some new digital efforts. However, they have some extra risk, and mainly that they are outsourcing all of those digital efforts. So they have an outsourcing risk. Now, how does this relate to the right side, to creating controls? They summarize it into, you basically have your fundamental security, which you keep at maturity 2. However, you place some extra attention onto supplier management, where you increase that to maturity 4. And now, this is a very simple example, but now in one example, you can show what the cybersecurity strategy on high level is. This is mainly very interesting for smaller companies, especially if you're a small company like this and you have maybe 10 employees in your business. A slide like this would be perfect. Most likely, you don't really need more. Doesn't really like to go to the next one, so I'm going to do it manually. So what is the cybersecurity campus in a nutshell? It's a tool to visualize, discuss, and compare cybersecurity strategy in a standardized manner. Now you can make it in different shapes. Originally, on the one here I have on the right side is the one that originally got developed out of research. However, we already saw some cases, you can make it really however you want. You can make it like this, or you can turn it like this. I also had cases where you could go to a bar and I could write it down on a little piece of paper right there, and then on how your cybersecurity strategy would look like. So it's really flexible in the way you use it. Now, to go a little bit into its origin. So the origin was my research I did with Antwerp Management School, where we looked into medium sized enterprises as company, basically companies, every kind of company up to 250 people. Those were in our target area. And why I was researching that is because as a security consultant back then, still at a security firm, I noticed that more and more smaller companies were asking for cybersecurity. However, it was really difficult to tackle and strategize with them because they really require a different mentality, a different approach. And they were also really important. So what we figured out in that same research is that even though our efforts and focus on cybersecurity mainly have been focused on the big players, the small players are really important already. So they already drive 99% of our economic, not drive, but they involve in 99% of the economic activities in the entire world. So everywhere in any supply chain, you will find these smaller enterprises. And they also contribute to 60% of the global workforce. So all in all, when I had my practical experience, and I combined it with the knowledge that these SMBs are really important within the landscape, led me to research this component. And what we noticed is these guys are really more vulnerable. Actually, recently I read the cybersecurity report from, I think it was Australia, where they even say that if you're a small company compared to a medium-sized company, then in general, a smaller company takes more damage after a cyber attack. So I think they average it to 80,000. Don't quote me on these numbers, but if it's small companies did 80,000, it will cost 80,000 euros or dollars in case of a cyber incident. Well, for medium-sized or bigger-sized company, it was only 60,000. So these small companies are really more vulnerable. And I mean, it shows. It shows. We looked into I went into research and we looked into what's happening here, and we noticed that, with a little bit of common sense, honestly, you would have figured this out, but they really lack the resources to defend against attackers. Lack of resources and implementation cost of standards that were too high. That really went out as the most important hurdles for a small company to protect themselves. So I went to research together with them, and we used a methodology called the science research, where instead of natural research tends to look at a specific phenomenon and then looks why is it happening, how is it happening, explaining what's happening. Instead, what we did here is we focused on creating something. So we used scientific rigor combined with business needs and business relevance in order to design something instead of figure out something. So that is the approach that we use, called design science. And what we did is we collected data out of, we had a nice group session in a group support system. If anyone is familiar with that, we had a total of, I think it was 10, 15 experts specialized in SMBs also. And we had in total 130 years of total experience in cybersecurity, where we collected data on three main components. So we had the obstacles. The obstacles I already showed, that was basically the lacked resources. Yeah, that really stood out. Then we looked into controls. So we took the NIST controls, the NIST cybersecurity framework controls, so not the NIST 853, but the cybersecurity framework. So there we rated them for the smaller companies, and we looked at design, and design was mainly looking at what
Vincent, your mic is out.
is it been out for long or it just went out?
Oh, it was. I was quickly.
Okay. I will just explain. Should I start the slide again, Gilbert?
Yeah, start the slide again.
Okay. So in the research, we started collecting data, and we had a total of around 10 cybersecurity experts with specialized in smaller companies with a total of 130 years of cybersecurity experience. And in that research, where we used the support system, we looked at three main components. One is the obstacles, so what hurdles those smaller companies for doing cybersecurity. Second, we look at the controls, specifically the NIST cybersecurity framework, so not the NIST 853. Mainly because there we want to extend it and we want it to be free, so we don't have any license issue. And lastly, we looked at design components, in which components are relevant if you want to design something for these smaller companies that really can be used in practice. Now, so we did this research with the group support system.
Valt weer weg.
Vincent, je
I
microfoon
see
valt
my
weer weg.
mic muted again.
It is.
Did it?
Just as you went to the new slide.
Maybe it's a slide thing. I will just continue from here. So
Let it slide ago.
So we did we did the research, we collected the data, we analyzed the data, and we came out of 8 requirements, where the 3 main components were it needed to have the necessary flexibility. That was really the main one in the smaller companies. So you needed to have a solution that's able where you can connect and change to the specific environment. Included risks and need to be really, really easy to understand. So we came with these 8 requirements, started designing, and in the end of the research, we ended up with the cybersecurity canvas based on the requirements. But very interestingly, but honestly, that's a little bit of a sidetrack, is we also ended up with an SMB cybersecurity quadrant, where you see the NIST cybersecurity framework categories plotted based on ease of implementation and effectiveness. And I'll go into that a little bit in one of the next slides. And what's the canvas? So here we see again an example of the canvas. This was the original canvas, where we took the example of a small online retailer, where on the left side we have business context. We have the business context itself, we have company risks, and we have cyber risks. So we also to components of the fact that cyber risk tends to be very different from company risk. So include other risk and also see how cyber relates to other company risk. And then on the right side, we specifically chose then to categorize it based on the NIST framework. However, in later phases, we actually removed that. And then sidetrack, very interesting though, is this is the quadrant on which of the NIST cybersecurity categories were performing and how they were performing. And where you see that, especially if you're just starting, you're not at advanced yet, it's really good to focus on these top performers right here. So, and this sees risk assessment as a control basically. So here we have it as a control, and there you see very effective categories that are also easy to implement. But what was mainly interesting is that if you see this line, the way it moves, basically it says, in general, the easier something is to implement, it tends to be more effective. So you could keep that in mind. If you have something that's very complicated, it could be that in cybersecurity it's not very effective. At least that is what the flow here was. And very interesting is that government actually really scored very low, and it was way more practical oriented. But we could expect it from smaller companies. So, in summary, we did 130 years of expert experience. We came with 8 requirements, and out of there, the cybersecurity canvas was born. Now, based on that, we used it, we got with the canvas, and we started working with it in practice. I was using it with my own freelance business quite a lot, but we already started changing it out a little bit. One of the main components, instead of focusing on the model itself, so we have the different categories and different components, we focused on, it's more about the connection. It's about aligning left and right brain. It's not specifically about which components are on which side. So we simplified it a bit.
I have a question, Vincent.
Sorry, you have a question?
I have a question, yes. Did you try it out on multiple small companies already?
Yeah, I did it on a number of small companies, mainly as a practice. Very interesting. What I thought was more interesting though is I did a shared session with a number of municipalities in cities and villages in Belgium, where we came up with a shared cybersecurity vision. So we used the tool to collect some data, and we came up with a shared canvas, which was really nice to see actually.
Okay, interesting, yeah.
Yeah, it was really nice because it gives you a point of view to discuss as a country, basically, almost on how to tackle cybersecurity and where you put your focus and where you put your risks. Also because you need to be very limited if you do it in a canvas, right? So you cannot list a whole Excel sheet of risks. You need to be very specific on what you target as a risk. You need to be very specific on the components on the right side.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the answer.
Yeah, so another change we did is we removed the NIST CSF. So basically what you could do, the framework is compatible with almost any framework you use right now, or no framework at all. You can even use it on any abstraction level that you want to. I will go into that a little bit more, but it's really interesting. And we had some increased flexibility also on the left side. So we saw that not, if you started, this is maybe some experience also, Gilbert, for you, if we noticed that in case you start in a small company where you could not always involve top level managers, then you could focus on, then company risk might be less relevant. So you could also focus more on the cyber risk itself. Or in a case of a company where a specific IT manager is just tasked with a specific task, then you could also focus a little bit more. And in some cases, laws and regulations could become its own separate component as well. But in the end, we actually ended up that you can just make whatever flavor you want. So if you want to draw it on a piece of paper, go ahead. If you want to make your own PowerPoint and you want to draw the components, go ahead. It's really, really flexible. How to use it, this is really nice. So this will explain that a little bit further. I already see it. So you have the why, you have the how, and you need to start defining the why, designing the how, and then connect and communicate. And that's really important. So you start, you really need to follow this flow, and you also see different. So the why is really about defining, while the how is way more about design. But you should never forget to connect. These are like left and right brain. So that whole issue where we see that security doesn't connect to the business, that should be gone. That should really integrate in. That's the point. So define the why. Why should you plan all your objectives? Make sure you have a good sense of risk and include regulations. So that is where you start the why. So what is your business goal? Which regulations do you need to comply with? Basically, what's the rules of the game? What are your risks? We have company-specific risks. Like this is not a cybersecurity risk, but could be very relevant nonetheless. Could also be that cyber risk involved, like you have a connection upstairs from a cyber risk to company risk. It could be that certain cyber risks hit this risk, like a sub-risk, in which you actually see here. So data leak leads to bad reputation, which could lead to this risk. But it's really all about why. Like, so why are you doing cybersecurity? Then on the second side, we have design the how. Where I really promote you to do some creative thinking, especially if you work in a small company. You need to be creative with your resources. You need to be creative in the way you use your, you implement controls, you look at controls. This really helps. So instead of using, I would say, instead of using frameworks as a point of reference in which you need to follow structuredly, if you're a small company and don't need to comply, really focus on using these frameworks really as inspiration. Then look at your own environment and come up with creative solutions which make sense cost-wise. Especially in smaller companies, by the way, because cost-wise you can really cut into your own profit margin if you don't look at cost. Now, then we look for opportunities and of course weigh the risks on the other side to the cost. That's really important. Start defining it, looking at the connections, and communicate. So ask the question to the right people. How do the risk impact the goals? So why is this connected to that? Aren't we missing risk? Maybe that could be a question from security, or isn't it true that whatever we're buying on the right side is not, it's too expensive against the benefits on the left side? So now you have one point of view where you can discuss this canvas with all the stakeholders you have. And it's really right to have to now ask the right questions, and that every stakeholder basically understands the connections and why is what connected to. Why is something connecting? So why is this one connected to that? Why is the data loss prevention connected to the cyber or the company risks? Does it make sense cost-wise? Do these components make sense? And such. But it gives one image that you can discuss. It's really easy to discuss something like this in a meeting.
I have a question from the last slide, please.
Yeah, yes.
This connection, how do you note it down with this, in this way, this blue speaking balance, or how do you do that? Because the first why and the how are very clear how to note it down in the canvas, but the communication and the connection, how do you note it down?
How do you note it down? So it depends a little bit on your environment. I also think that in some cases noting down is not particularly what you're trying to do. What you're trying to do is you're trying to put the connection inside of the head of the people. So basically, just like any other tool you have that communicates, is you want to connect people together, and you want to connect. It needs to connect in their head. So it's not just a writing exercise where you have it all written down and they can see the connections. In order to really accelerate action, and it needs to be right inside the heads of all the stakeholders.
I agree, but if you don't catch the thought process, then in a year and you're looking back, maybe you don't know it anymore.
Yeah, so you're saying, like, how do you write it down? Personally, if you need to write it down, I would write it down separately. So don't leave it in here. So you can have. I normally make one page out of this. So you take the one page, and the one page you call cybersecurity strategy. You have the canvas in the middle, you keep it, and down below you give it some context, you give it some extra juice to for it to make sense. You explain the connections, you explain also what is the most important, most significant components, because one thing you can also not see is what's more important, regulations or business goals. I think most of you know the answer, but it's good to explain it nonetheless. So I would write it down in a one pager and emphasize the things that are important. Another thing that we do, that's my personal experience, I use group support system, so a tool called Meeting Wizard, if you guys are interested, in which I hold meetings and store the data. Like while we're holding a meeting, we have a tool in which we automatically store the data, and it gives a really nice report on what every stakeholder said, what they related to, and it gives consensus. So, but for that you really need to look at the tool called Meeting Wizard. I think it's meetingwizard.nl. I can share it if you are interested. But yeah, that's how you could connect it. But keep it simple. It's like if you ever work with the business model canvas, I think it will make sense. You start off with the canvas, you describe your business because that's the business model canvas, but it's not enough. You need to have the one page or a business plan to make sense of the model.
Yeah, I think it's clear. Thanks.
So what could you do? This is more of a practical approach. Like, how would you make it? You could make one cybersecurity strategy that's for next year. You could also say, I first write down the canvas of what is the current state. Then we make a future state. That is the most common approach, actually. And then you also use the tool in order to map the current state. Where you could even say, what I often notice is that certain components are unknown on the left side. And then you can also do a future state. So what do you want? Where you're aiming at? And another approach that I see, this is a little bit more common in bigger companies, is where you make just a year plan. So you make, what's the strategy for first year, what's the strategy for second year, what's the strategy for third year, because the risks and components and priorities tends to change over these years, so you can make per year. As an example how you can do it. In a PowerPoint you could have like 3 to 5 slides. Now to get down to a few examples. Now here we had the workshop. Here it's meetingwizard.nl, so you can look at it. But here we had one workshop of like 20 people. We collected data. If you don't know how visible it is, especially if you're on the phone, but we collected it here, right in the tool, where we collected the data, we collected the input, and we could use that input to create their canvas. In this case, it was a really nice and simple canvas. It's Dutch, so I can explain it. So basically what they said is they wanted, they were cities mostly. There was a group of people who worked at cities, and they wanted fast and good services to the citizen, and they had some very simple cyber risks which were really relevant for them at the moment. especially, for example, the human mistakes. So they had a lot of, because in the city they work with a lot of people, so they had a lot of people mistakes from people, and they looked at very simple solutions. I think like MFA. I think for a lot of people that is a common solution. They needed very simple solution, and they're working a lot on awareness and restriction of access. And you could really see from, although they might have an ISO framework, in reality, as soon as you start writing down cybersecurity framework, you see that basically their focus is really on a few key controls they had. So they had awareness, multi-factor authentication, and restricting of access. Those were the main approach of their strategy, while the other components tend to be compliance related and a little less important. That was a really interesting one. This is also an interesting one. This one is a little bit, it's a little bit less specific with the controls. This one was I made actually in cooperation with Meeting Wizard and Antwerp Management School also. And where they looked at was the sys controls. So instead of doing the controls in a more specific manner, they basically said we have a maturity-based approach. So first of all, we have in our strategy, we need the fundamentals, and the fundamentals are all the sys controls need to go at least to, they don't call it maturity 1, but they wanted to have, I will just call it maturity 2, maturity 1. And then based on the risk, especially because they here had suppliers, they were working with a lot of software. So based on that, they focused on 2 specific controls to a higher maturity. And that was part of their strategy. So this is a maturity approach of how you could define those controls without going too much in depth. If you do that though, if you go to a high abstraction, it works great, but you need to be careful that the stakeholders and whoever is involved understand this abstraction level. So in that case, it's really good again to write down why you chose the abstraction, how the abstraction works, and you could do that in, like, let's say a 1-pager. Another case, this is I really like this example. It's actually an example that came directly out of the research, where the conference also has a little bit more explaining. But here you see an IT service provider, a smaller one, where we have components of the business context, where you see that for a small IT service provider, security is actually more of a real business case, because as soon as you can show your level of cybersecurity, you can differentiate yourself from the competition. Because if you hire a small IT service provider, you also look at cybersecurity, but more as a feature. So they were looking at that. They figured out actually in this example, if you read the Verizon report, that in this kind of companies, human mistakes and employee mistakes that tend to work with a lot of IT, because they work so much with IT that they tend to make mistakes. Based on that, they had some risks, and in this case, they still use the NIST cybersecurity framework as a basis, and they focus on 3 main categories. So these are basically the part from risk assessments, which you basically do on the left side. They took the 3 most significant, most high performing categories from NIST. So they took protective technology, identity and access, awareness and training, and then they wrote down specific components in each one on which they're focusing. Really interesting. Now, to go on, how could you integrate this with standards?
Okay, but we have a question before we go on. Ferry, come with your question.
On the previous slide, or?
Ferry, are you going to put it yourself? Or he cannot ask So I will put a question for him because his mic is broken. Since this canvas was designed with small medium business in mind, to what extent do you think it still can be used in the corporate setting, whether in the entirety or in smaller functions?
I love that question, actually. I almost partly I hoped somebody would ask this question.
Okay, well, there it is.
No, but it's really great actually in a corporate setting too. And this is why instead of focusing this presentation on small to medium enterprises, I wanted to focus more on the canvas because this component this is really good for the bigger enterprises as well. The only difference is you need to look at it at a different abstraction level. So it's all about abstraction. So instead of saying we're focusing on specific controls here, you could, for example, let's see if we can go back a little. Oh yeah, that's actually a good one. You could, for example, take a framework and take a more maturity-based approach where in a few steps, you can explain the strategy. Also, what you could do is, one thing I've seen happening is that you use like a framework or goals within a certain, or you take the implementation of a whole framework as, for example, the ISO as one of the key components in your strategy. So you basically, the bigger you are, the more, the higher you go in abstraction level. But that gives everybody, it's really cool. I really like this. Everybody that's involved in the cybersecurity team in one image understands the whole strategy. They understand why they're doing it on the website and they understand high level what they're doing.
You can also use it very good for business alignment, even with departments or teams or groups.
Yeah, exactly. You could even do business. I think business alignment is a real good component. You could also say, for example, I can make a case in the sense that let's say you're doing cybersecurity, but not for the whole company, but you're specifically doing it for marketing, for the marketing department, and you want their involvement. You could let them write down their goals as a marketing department. And then you can explain them on the right side. Yeah, but if you're a marketing department and you care about this, yeah, then we are doing this from a cybersecurity perspective to protect your activities and to help you reach your goal as a marketing department. So it can use for any kind of setting in which you need cybersecurity alignment.
Yeah, that's great because that's, of course, what's in many cases is missing, small and big companies.
Yeah, basically it is. And this is also what I noticed from experience. But it's also what is missing that I noticed from the research itself is the fact that the alignment and involvement is one of the biggest components of why cybersecurity fails, or doesn't specifically have to fail, but it has the appearance that it fails. It's because there is no understanding and alignment on both sides of the brain. I would call it, I like the image of the brain. It's really like the brain. You need to involve all components of the brain. So that means also the business and on your side, the cybersecurity.
Oh, yeah, it's a very nice way of saying it. Okay, thank you. I think the question is answered very well. Thanks.
Oh, nice. That's good. So a little bit of integration. Actually, we started answering this one a little bit, the integration with standards. Actually, because of the question. So how does it integrate? And that's exactly what I'm actually trying to explain with abstraction. I could actually have used this whole slide instead of explaining it only, but basically this is what you can do. The right side or the left side for that matter, you can use any kind of grouping in any kind of abstraction. It's about conveying a message. It's not about the specific components within the framework. It's about connecting left with right. It's about connecting business or the why with the how. That's where it's about, and whatever level of extraction you use, it's alright. So in that way, you can also integrate it with other frameworks. For example, this is a maturity approach I used for the ISO, where you say fundamentally we maintain current controls. We try to be compliant to the changing in compliancy, but on the other hand, he uses even a specialized category. We focus on building an in-house SOC because we believe in it from a strategy point of view, and we build endpoint detection and response. That's our focus. So we build the fundament, we build focus, and you use the canvas to convey that message. You use the canvas to convey the strategy. It's not really about the components you use. It's about you having a you're having a way to, in one image, to explain what is happening from both sides. So what's happening from the why and what's happening from the how. And how you do that is your own. How you can best explain it, you can only tell. That's not me. You could also do this. I don't really recommend it in most cases, to be honest, but you could also just expand it, right? No one said that the canvas should only be 3 blocks on the left and 3 blocks on the right. If you want to keep the 3 blocks on the left, but you really want to convey the message of how complex cybersecurity is, for example, then use all these components to the right. Now you can also specify really granularly in what you're doing. The canvas is basically a toolkit to convey the message, to convey the alignment. It's how you fill it in is really up to you. Now here, and this is the NIST ASF. Here I didn't show the canvas itself, but if you, I can share you the link, but if you go to the original research, it comes with a PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint was still based on the NIST cybersecurity framework. And that PowerPoint also comes with components. So it shows you a few components and categories that you can reuse on the left side. And it also comes with categories and components you can use on the right side, where these components are even ordered on the level of effectivity and easy to implement. So that was the SMB cybersecurity quadrant. So basically, if you would only use this framework that came out of the research, you could say we prefer to use as much of this, and as more risk is coming in, you're trying to expand your horizon with multiple categories and components, but you use it in this order in order to keep the prioritization level in the right way. Actually, that answers, I think it's, what is it? We have 12 minutes more. That answers as the Q&A. So if there are any questions, we could also, we had a little poll that I would like to show. So if we can put that one in the chat, it would be great. Very interesting to see what would come out of the poll, actually. I think this is, you guys are the largest group I had until now on regarding this conference. Now what you see is a lot of people are still a little bit doubtful about the use of it. If I keep the current state, 70% says I don't know, 30% say yes, and the others say no. And I think that I don't know. If you don't know it for now, I think it wouldn't hurt to try it out. So I can give you the resource at least to download it and try it out. You can try it on an evening. You can take a piece of paper. You can try to do the current cybersecurity strategy and see how it would end up in a canvas. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Nobody gets hurt from it. And I think you can do it in like 5 to 10 minutes anyway. Are there any questions I missed, Gilbert? Did you collect any questions I didn't see yet?
No, there's just some questions coming in. Um, more reactions to. Are there any questions? Please put on your hand or type them in the chat. That is the time for questions. Or maybe I can invite Michael Sim to give a reaction. I saw several reactions from him. Michael, let us hear.
Hey, do you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, I'm based in Luxembourg. I want to say a great thank you to Isaka Nederland eerst en vooral voor uw disponibiliteit voor mensen van Isaka Luxembourg. We're really grateful for this. I would absolutely thank Vincent van Dijk and I presume his collaborators from Antwerp Management School, whom I absolutely love and adore for the work they do on governance, risk and compliance. I think this is an absolutely interesting tool that Vincent is putting out there for the small and medium businesses, whom absolutely are desperate for access to easy to apply information, but who unfortunately are usually, I find, have very limited resources to apply these solutions to safeguarding against cybersecurity risks, and they are many. So absolutely grateful to Vincent for all his efforts, and thank you very much for your disponibility. Based on the input that you've given us in this wonderful presentation that you do, I hope you don't mind me speaking English. One extension to that would be, I mean, you mentioned NIST, cybersecurity framework, which I've adored and I've used very high level in an audit of a small and medium business, assessing their website and delivery, and the feedback I got from them was that I threw the book at them, they threw the book back, and I was I was astonished by the quality of their response. I mean, they're a very young company, they're a startup here in Luxembourg, and they're very successful. I myself, I cannot recommend using the frameworks that are provided by KISS regarding operating systems, applications, and things. Use KISSCAT Lite if you can't afford it, or become a member and use KISSCAT Pro. Use it to assess the weaknesses either from a software configuration point of view or an OS point of view, or whatever they've got to offer. I mean, what they've got to offer is astonishing, and it's free. It's free. It's free, and it's bloody good because it's delivered by the developers themselves of macOS or Windows or whatever it is you're working on, or Unix. Oh, that's it. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to have taken so much of your time. Thank you. Thank you, Val.
Thank you for your great response. Really, thank you.
I see a lot of questions that people like to try the canvas out, so they would like to have the link. Maybe we can provide it together with the presentation to where they can find your work and
yeah, it's also inside the
explanation. Yeah.
We also have it here. Look.
Okay, let's take a picture, people. Take a picture.
You'll get the PowerPoint anyway, but if you want it already, then take a picture indeed.
Yeah.
But you can look also on my website if for anyone that's interesting. not very commercially, to be honest. I just love to share some articles. So also nice to read. I'm posting quite a lot over there.
Okay then. Other questions, please. Otherwise, reactions or opinions? If not, then I'm going to thank Vincent very much on behalf of ISACA Netherlands, and apparently also some neighboring chapters like Luxembourg. Oh, there is a question. Or not. No, it's already gone. The hand came up and down again. Vincent, thank you. And then we close this meeting. And everybody, we will see you soon. We have a lot of interesting presentations in mind, and keep on reading the newsletter and of course our ISACA website. So thank you, have a nice evening and goodbye.
Have a nice evening, guys, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks. Bye-bye.